we shouldn't be a moment, Chair.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, Chair, I understand we are now live.
Okay, thank you. Right, if we get our meeting started then, are there any apologies for absence? I'm not aware of any.
Chair, none have been received in Democratic Services.
Thank you. And are there any disclosable pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests tonight? Don't think there are. Okay. And I'm not aware that we have I understand we don't have any speakers have arranged to speak in the meeting tonight.
No, Chair, no members of the public have registered to speak.
Okay. You could see the football if we we go at this speed. Okay, so we're into item number 4, the new model code of conduct. And I understand, Clive, you're going to speak to this item.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members of the committee. I don't intend to work through the report verbatim because obviously you've had a chance to read it already, but I'll just outline perhaps the most important parts, and that's that the council, as all other local authorities, is required to have a code of conduct, and subject to some stipulations in legislation, we have a degree of freedom to decide what goes into that code. Now, many authorities adopted codes when the law changed in 2012, and they've been amended at various times since, depending on the authority concerned wishing to do so. The Local Government Association has carried out quite an extensive consultation exercise with local authorities. It's been done in 2 stages. The first was to invite general comments on the issues that local authorities had with the existing codes that they had in place, and to invite suggestions for a new model code. Following that exercise, they drafted a model code of conduct and again consulted on that and produced a document which has now been circulated to all local authorities. It's important to note that the code is not mandatory. It is a model code, and the idea was to just try and update things and bring things on to reflect some of the changes that have happened in the last 9 years or so since they produced the last time they produced a model code. So the position that this council is in is we can decide if we want to either adopt that code, we could decide to keep the code we've got, or we could do something in between and revise the code that we have in place and perhaps take the best parts of the model code and adapt them for our own purposes. I do think that because of the detail that the code goes into and the framework legally that it has to sit within, that there's possibly a need to sort of analyse the content and to work through perhaps some real life situations and for members to be able to feed in their own views. And that's one of the reasons why a recommendation has been made for a working party to perhaps do some of the groundwork on this, so that a future meeting of this committee can receive perhaps a more informed view on where our code might need amending, if that's the view taken by the working party, and also to look at the arrangements in place for dealing with breaches to see if they need perhaps again a bit of an update. There's a few points in the code which I think should be flagged up at this, in the model code that should be flagged up at this point, and I think it's very important to have those in mind as this matter progresses. The first is that the code can only ever apply to a councillor when they're acting as such, so there is a distinction between private life of the councillor and what they do in their office, and I think that's an issue that's raised a little bit of commentary, we could perhaps say, from other authorities and from organisations representing authorities, because the draft says that this could apply when it appears that you're acting as a councillor. I think there's quite a distinction there, because that's perhaps going further than the legislation allows. And then there's a few other provisions in there talking about the use of council resources for political purposes, and I think issues like that need to be really carefully considered, and so that anything that we do in the future, perhaps to adopt this code or to adapt what we have, has to be very clear, because obviously as members you need to know exactly what those parameters are. And given there are some legislative restrictions in there, obviously we want to make sure that we don't get in a muddle around those, and that you're clear on those points. So those are sort of the main issues I think that stand out from this. But it is really a matter of the working group, if you choose to appoint it, working through this and deciding what we think is appropriate for this authority. It might be that we match some of the things that other authorities are doing, but we don't need to be drawn by the views of other authorities, and it really is for you collectively, and that's the whole council, because it's only the council that can make this decision, being happy that this is appropriate for North Warwickshire. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before we go to a vote, did anybody want to make any comments or ask any questions? Councillor Dervix.
Thank you. I've read through this. I first came across it because I'm on the standards committee at the county as well. When we got the consultation, it coincided with Lorna being very ill, so I didn't go through it in as much detail as I would have liked to, or make my recommendations. But there are things in this that I think we perhaps should be considering because of changes in legislation. Equally, there are parts of it that I really do disagree with, that I think we should actually debate. So I would hope that we can go forward with a working group to discuss the changes that are needed. I don't think personally that it would be a good thing to do to just take on this model policy wholesale, but one of our jobs as councillors is to update our policies and procedures, so a working group does seem appropriate to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? I can't see any other hands.
In that case,
sorry. And did you want to speak? Sorry.
Just to pick up on an issue that came out quite strongly to me through all the reports, well, it seems to as a thread, is the use of social media. And somewhere in the processes to do with these reports, I think we need to find a way to address the use of social media, perhaps quite specifically. But that should come out in the course of the discussion in the working group.
Thank you. I think it is an evolving culture, isn't it? And some guidance would be of value. Councillor Humphreys.
I was just going to say, I actually thought Neil was going to propose the recommendation. I was going to second it. So if
I was going to.
If Neil's happy to do that, I'll second it, because I think it's right that what he said and what Anne has said, we need to look at it and be very aware, because these things sit in place for a long time once you've made a decision. So I'd be quite happy to second that proposal. Your proposal when you make it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dervix, you had your hand up again. Was that to propose, or was there another comment?
That was to propose, yes.
Okay, so Councillor Dervix is proposing, David Humphreys is seconding. Shall we go to a vote?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Councillor Dervix?
For.
Councillor Hayfield?
For.
Councillor Humphreys?
For.
Councillor MacDonald?
4.
Councillor McLaughlin,
4.
Councillor Parker.
4.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Unanimous.
Thank you. So we move on to item number 5, the update on allegations of the breaches of Code of Conduct. Over to you, Clive.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I only want to comment briefly on this because I think the content is generally evident from the report itself. The standards regime doesn't expressly require publication of the outcome of any allegations that are made, but as you'll see from a later report, it's recommended that where a formal investigation takes place and a formal finding is made in relation to conduct, that a public statement is made on that occasion. The report here deals with lesser issues. Those are matters where there's been an allegation, where there's been a preliminary review of the allegation, and it's been decided in 2 out of 3 instances that there was no contravention of the code concerned, and in 1 that there was a very minor transgression which didn't warrant investigation. So it's really a matter of updating members just to show that we do have a standards regime which is required to work for this authority and for the parishes in our area, and that these matters are progressed using the correct process, and really to keep you up to date with the general nature of those allegations. What I would add is that on any occasion where a formal investigation takes place and it falls to this committee or a subcommittee to make a determination in relation to an allegation, that committee or the subcommittee sitting at that time would have the opportunity to decide what publicity there should be in relation to the finding, and the view I think to be taken is that each of those cases would be considered on its merits, and it would be for you as members investigating and adjudicating to decide on the extent of that publicity, and that's why on this occasion this is anonymised and it's if you like general detail rather than specifics. And one point that Councillor McLaughlin picked up on in relation to the last item is that each of these deals with use of technology, and perhaps it's something that the working group will be able to pick up on, because it seems that perhaps people are analysing things a little more now. We're using this sort of media for conducting meetings, and I think it's just a passing observation that each of those complaints is related to various forms of technological communication. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just a comment that I would want to make is when in an employment where somebody is being paid to do work and so on, there is often a union rep or somebody that can support someone that has a similar allegation. And my only comment is that I wonder how clear it is as to what support councillors have when there is an allegation, or whether councillors know who to turn to in those instances. You know, I think we can each be very vulnerable, can't we? So maybe the working party in reviewing the code of conduct and how we approach allegations and so on can consider that as well. So for that agenda item, it's a case of noting it, isn't it? There's not a voting that's got to take place, is that right?
Well, Chair, I don't know if any other members have any observations or anything they'd like to progress in relation to that, but subject to that, since it's for noting, if no member had any objection to it, you could just take it as read rather than having a formal vote.
Okay. Councillor Dervix, you have your hand up. Okay. Right. So, sorry, I thought you wanted to speak, Councillor Dervix.
I think Councillor Dervix is on mute, Chair.
Sorry, I'll start again.
If you want to speak.
I was trying to agree with you on what you've just said about the pathways of support for councillors if they should find themselves in this position, and whether it is possible to make that as a recommendation for the previous item, because it wouldn't fit in with this one. I don't know whether that fits in with the rules or not, or whether we can just pass that on as something that we would.
I think I thought it was something. I thought it was something that the group would consider when they're looking at processes.
Yes.
An allegation made.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that should be included.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If I could just comment on that, the provisions that have to be in place under the Localism Act for investigating allegations of breaches have to incorporate independent persons, and one of the roles of independent persons is for a member against whom an allegation has been made to be able to consult them in relation to that matter. Now, I think it's something that definitely should be considered as part of the review of the working group, on the basis that we now have 7 independent persons, and it might be that members want to consider in more detail how they operate, or how we can perhaps support them to support members. So I think it is something which you may wish to debate further.
Okay. I've just realised that having agreed that we'll have a working party, that what I didn't say was that besides myself, Clive and Steve Maxey as Chief Exec, we would be looking for, I think, unless anybody else has any strong opinions, we'd be looking for 2 or 3 others, probably 3 others to join the group. And unless you're clear now that yes, you'd like to be part of that, if you want to email me or contact me and let me know that you want to be part of that group, and we can take that forwards.
Right, I would appreciate being part of that group as long as I'm not overruled elsewhere.
Okay, thank you, Neil.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're not looking at me, are you, Neil?
Okay, so we've got another couple.
It may be the group decides they want somebody different, but failing that, I will join it.
Thank you. You'd be welcome. So if another couple of people would like to volunteer at some point in the near future, that would be lovely. Thank you. Right, so we go to item 6. That's the recommendations of the Committee on Standards in Public Life. Again, that report was sent out in advance. Clive, did you want to speak to it?
Again, Chair, only in summary, the Committee for Standards in Public Life, and I do apologise because I think I've used the wrong initials in one paragraph of the report, got the letters in the wrong order. It does have quite an important role and quite an influential role. And again, it's something we should note that these are not steps that are set in legislation that the Council must follow, but it's a suggestion of good practice in relation to the standards regime, and it's been the result of a long-term study of the standards regime in local government across the country. And again, I think this perhaps overlaps into the earlier items and is possibly a matter that would want to be considered by the working party. But there is a number of those items already incorporated into our code, and where we don't perhaps meet those, that's something that we could perhaps consider as the working party continues to look at the code. So it's really just for noting, and again, it was if the members had any issues, particularly they wanted to highlight and perhaps give any direction to the working party when looking at the matter in general.
So is there any person wants to make any comments now? Can't see any hands. Okay, So we've come to the end of our agenda. And
Can I propose the recommendation then?
yes, please. Who'd like to second that?
I will.
Thank
Did you get that?
Councillor.
Dave Humphreys.
Yes. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Dervix,
For.
Councillor Hayfield,
For.
Councillor Humphreys,
For.
Councillor MacDonald,
For.
Councillor Coppin,
For.
Councillor Parker.
For.
Thank you, Chair. So no, we didn't have a formal vote on the other item. It's a matter for you, Chair, if it's accepted by all members, but we can have a formal vote on item 5 if you wish.
Well, we just did on the last one. I think perhaps we should for complete approach.
So if we have a proposed, then Chair.
I'll propose that.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Councillor Dervix,
For.
Councillor Hayfield,
For.
Councillor Humphreys,
For.
Councillor MacDonald,
For.
Councillor McLaughlin,
For.
Councillor Parker.
For.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That concludes our agenda for this evening. So I think.
Well done. You could have another hour and a half meeting like that. Thank you.
Doesn't time fly?
We're still recording, aren't we?